Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. And did you ever realize that you had a trait or skill that you had, but you never did anything with? Well, my guest today waited till she was 47 to do something with hers. Orly K.G always thought she was funny, but never really did anything with it until she decided to sign up for a stand-up comedy class at the ripe old age of 47. Now, 3 years later, Orly is a full-fledged stand-up comic working the scene in Chicago, but also developing a community of funny moms and creating the Bad Moms of Comedy. We're going to find out how it all started and where it's going. Orly K.G, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I am great. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking. And I want to start by talking about the sort of the magic of living near a major metropolitan area. So I grew up, born and raised outside of New York City. And one of the great things about it is like you can literally take a class for anything. Chicago's like this, LA's like that, even like areas like Austin and Miami. You can basically sign up for everything. So when I was in New York, I took improv, I took sketch, I took screenwriting, which I think is a law. If you live in New York and LA, you have to take a screenwriting class.
Of course.
For you, it was a stand-up comedy class.
It
So
was.
tell me why, of all the things, because again, Chicago, very much like New York, if you want a class for something, they got it. What was it about signing up for that first class?
Honestly, it was just the time of my life. There's something that happens when your kids are in high school that they suddenly don't need you anymore. It's this like overnight thing. And I wasn't a helicopter parent by any means, but I found myself having more free time. So my husband and we went out to dinner with friends. We went to a comedy club called the Lincoln Lodge in Chicago. I went to the washroom and it had a sign that said, "Have you thought about taking stand-up comedy classes?" And I'm like, "Why not?" And then I fell in love with it. And I have not stopped since I've been in that class.
And so tell me about, so for folks who maybe pop this on and be like, stand-up comedy class, how do you learn to be funny? And obviously we all know that it's not teaching you how to be funny. It's teaching you essentially the tools and tricks that it takes to perform on stage. But did you feel like when you walked into that room, because a lot of people were like you, probably the ages range from, the Gen Z all the way to probably boomer, I'm sure. What was it that you felt when you were in there? Were you like, I feel like I'm in the right spot, or do I,
Oh,
or
God, no. Joe, oh my God. I was 47 years old at the time. It took me an hour and a half to get dressed because this is like one of these cool parts of town. It's Logan Square. So everyone's like hipster and cool. And I'm like, I look like a narc. So this is going to be a problem. But I walked in, but we were all nervous. So, and again, it was all these people between the ages of like 20 something to like 50 something. And it was just more of giving you the confidence to go on stage, to write jokes, to learn structure. Right now, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're funny, if you're like the person at the party, if you're always invited to dinner because you always have funny stories, but you can't just say stories on stage because that's not funny. It's the isms inside the story. So it's they learn we learn to like break away the mumbo jumbo words and just get straight to the joke. Um, and I loved it. And then I started going to open mics, but every time I went to open mics, Joe, I'm like, where are my people? Where are my older people? It's just all 20-year-olds and they're talking about weed and
yeah.
touching themselves. And I'm like, I have a 30-year mortgage. Yeah, this is so weird. So I happened to go on a walk with a friend of mine. I was like, I don't know, 8 months into comedy. I said, I think I want to start this thing called Bad Moms of Comedy. She's like, I'm in. And she has been my co-producer ever since. And we have just been gathering all of these women, actually now around the country, to be on our shows. And it's been amazing. I love it.
That's awesome. I love that. And I want to talk about in terms of comedy in generations. So one of the things I always push back on is I'm a huge fan of like Mel Brooks and airplane movies. And you always argument in the 2020s, you can't make those movies anymore. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's art is always made in a time and place. So like The Godfather couldn't have been made in 1942. It had to be made in 1972. There's reasons things get made when they're made. But there is something to be said about what what is appropriate, right? I remember when I joined a sketch comedy group, I was the only Gen Xer. It was all like millennials and maybe a Gen Z, but I think it was mostly millennials. And there were a couple times where I'll be pitching jokes and they'll be like, "You can't say that," and I'm like, really? They're like, oh yeah, that's offensive. And like to me, I was like, I mean, and I'm not like an offensive person, but like for me to hear the feedback of someone saying that that was offensive, I was like, all right, well, cool. I didn't know. And obviously, I think that's part of growth and evolving as a
Yeah,
human.
we
You
should
learn.
all be sensitive to
Yes.
different types of groups. My thing is mothers are held on this weird pedestal of like you have to be the Madonna. You have to be the perfect, and I'm not talking about the Madonna like a virgin Madonna. I'm talking Jesus Madonna.
Yep.
And you have to do all the things, right? Your kids have to be perfect. Your house has to be perfect. And we're not perfect and it's okay. And so it was something that I wanted to talk about because I want people to realize that just because you're a mom or married to one or have one doesn't mean that that person isn't an actual human that has feelings and opinions. And so that's what I wanted to do. And a lot of women don't get that opportunity, especially on Chicago comedy stages or comedy stages really all around the country. It's still a very white man industry. And so I am like, and here's the other thing, funny is funny. Men love our show. The kids love our show, like, they're teenagers and they're college kids, because this is not a play date for your seven-year-old. Uh, People really enjoy it because if you know a woman, if you know a mom, if you are one, you're gonna understand it. We have been listening for years as women to men talk about their private parts. I'm trying to be clean on your show and whatever. And I'm like, well, I could talk about mine too and still not be disgusting, but also it'd be funny. Like let's give us a voice.
And so, what are guardrails for you? You mentioned the fact that you probably don't try to get as crass as some of these gross out comics that you see out there, but like, and I'm sure this is, and I don't want to put a blanket to your whole tour group, but like, is there things that you personally don't want to discuss on stage, or maybe as when someone when one of your compatriots go up there, you're like, ooh, I'd rather not hear that. What's your take on that when it comes to in terms of mom comedy?
Yeah. Well, I have my own personal rules for myself because I got into this older and my kids were already teenagers. And I don't know if you know this about teenagers, but they are still learning about what kind of adult they're going to be. So I didn't want to start ragging on my kids up there and having the whole world have an opinion about my kids when they're trying to figure out who the heck they are. Right.
Okay.
And then I also have a husband who did not see this coming either. And so he was like, hey, can you like put the brakes on the sex jokes? 'Cause that involves me and me alone. So, I'm like, "Hey, I get that." So, there are certain things that I can, like, push the boundaries on that make me comfortable, but it's still funny. Other moms rag on their kids. Other moms rag on their husbands. Go for it. Have fun. We tell everybody that we are not a safe for play date get together. We are 18 and over. It's gonna get a little crass, but never super raunchy. We don't get super detailed. It's more innuendos and we just have a good time. And we're called the bad moms of comedy, not the mean moms of comedy. We want people to be able to give themselves a night out. Moms never give themselves time just to have fun and have a good time because it's always about the kids and or their husbands. So it's like this is for you. And these women enjoy it. Oh my gosh, they have such a good time.
That's great. And in terms of the generations, the way comedians work, it used to be just wait for a spot at 2 a.m. at your local comedy club. You get your spots every night, and then you'd hopefully get earlier and earlier to prime time. But now with technology, you can your comedy can live and be accessible all day and night long. So how have the bad moms and yourself embraced technology in being able to share the comedy?
Well, first we had to learn it. And then but we're having a really good time putting stuff on social media. We put up jokes, we put up like isms. We have this thing called momisms, and they look like inspirational posters, but it's really just, the BS that we go through as women and moms. And we put up videos and we put up clips. And my thing is I've had several comics say to me, they're like, when are you going to give up bad moms and just do Orly K.G comedy? And I said, I'm not because I love the bad moms. I love the fact that these women have a good time and that we get to create this whole entire night for them. And again, I keep saying women, but men do like it as well. But we need to do more social media, as you know, Joe, because you're a funny guy and everything. You put it up on social media, people want something new after, right? And so it's like, okay, that's a really good joke. Do I really want to put that one up there or do I want to hold on to it? So I have now been doing it long enough that I feel like I'm like, yeah, let's just start putting more up there. But at the beginning, I'm like, but that's all I did.
Yeah.
So, but now I've got more, so it's fine.
There is that fine line too, because you mentioned I've seen comedians in the past. I remember in the early stages of Twitter, I would see these like people like attacking comedians on Twitter because they weren't funny, and they would to a man and woman would be like, "Hey, you ain't paying for these jokes, so this is not the comedy I'm going to put up on stage." And same for
True.
like, I mean, comedians are like that too when they appear on talk shows. They have like their talk show material that they'll have when they appear on a talk show or a podcast, but then they'll have their stage stuff. So how are you able to work in that world now of just being able to like, okay, this is a stage joke. This is gonna be an online joke. This might be something I share when I'm on a podcast. How do you have a formula to that, or are you kind of just shooting with it, shooting by the hip now?
What a lot of comics are doing is putting up all their crowd work, right? Because
Mm,
that stuff can't be repeated. It has to be at that moment with that person in the audience. And it's funny and it's great. The thing is, and the New York Times did a whole story about this, is that now people think when they go to a comedy club that it's all crowd work and they can talk through the whole thing. And we're like, no, shut up. I have jokes to say. But the stuff that we can put up that's easy and non-repeatable are those things. So it's a double-edged sword. It's interesting. It's an interesting game.
yeah, I mean that is smart though if you think about it for comedians to do that because I know for a lot of them they're working the act and so they're doing that joke all the time and the setup and the joke and the punchline and maybe tweaking it. But the last thing they want to do is put it out there in its rawest form. That's why you always see these stand-ups working to their special. So they're always they'll do the same act for 6 to 12 months, and then that special will essentially be the retirement ceremony. It's gonna be like, okay, cool. I
Right.
worked on these jokes all year and I'm gonna do it on there. Have you gotten to that point where you've worked up your material to a certain length? Because let's get Bad Moms for example. Like, how long are the sets for each of the moms? And then what do you hope to see in your comedic future where you're like, okay, cool, I'm ready to do a 60 minutes. I'm ready to do 90 minutes. Let's start with Bad Moms.
All right, we're gonna start with Bad Moms. Every show is different. So we have a roster of 80 something comics right now, and we're still finding more. So every time you see a Bad Mom show, it's gonna be a different lineup. It's be very odd if you saw the same one. We give them anywhere between 8 minutes and 25 minutes, depending on the show. So some shows need an intermission, so we need to like pad it and things like that. But the thing is, it is a showcase. You're gonna get many different comics. So you're probably gonna at the least, you'll get 3, at the most, you'll get 5. Does that make sense? Um, in that time, because I am on every show, it's mine. So I am on every show. I have to come up with new stuff because you will see me. So I have about an hour. I wouldn't say I wanna do it all as an hour. I also have an issue with I think I have the opposite issue of most comics where I don't want an hour of attention. I don't mind being the ringleader. I don't mind being the fluffer on the show. I am fine doing 15 minutes, some crowd work, telling people to turn off their phones, having a good time, doing stuff in between, and just running the show. That's my OCD for you. But I could, and I do get signed on shows to do 20, 30 something minutes. So, I do it, but this is my passion.
That's awesome. And so let's get into the nitty gritty, the capitalism part of it all. Because as comedians,
Oh,
yes,
comics aren't allowed to make money, Joe. What are you
yeah,
talking about?
yeah, no, I understand that, and I know that's that for many years most comics have to go by literally making nothing. But you've actually created something. Like this is a show that has, like you mentioned, dozens of people involved in it. What are the economics like? Like, what is it like having to put these? Do you have to pay for space? Are you splitting revenues with these clubs? How does it all work? Because I think people may be inspired by what you're going through, but like, all right, cool. I get the idea of like getting together a bunch of badass moms that are funny, but then like, I'd like to make some money out of this.
I love how you said we're a bunch of badass moms who are funny. Can I put that on a slogan, please? Like, we're a bunch of according to Joe, we're a bunch of badass moms who are funny. Um, so before I did comedy, I actually had, I think what you would call a real job. So I was a TV news reporter, and then I went into public relations. Then I owned my own company for 12 years. So I understand the economics of running a business, and I have incorporated a lot of what I learned in that business world into this business world. So some venues we do a ticket split. Some of them they let us keep the tickets as long as everybody buys like 2 items from them.
Yeah.
Um, and I make sure I pay my comics. In Chicago, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of comics. We have a really robust comic industry in Chicago. Everyone sees us as improv in Second City, but there is so much good stand up comedy here. And because of that, these comics will go to like 4 or 5 shows a night and they get paid anywhere from like, I don't know, 50 to $100. Well, I need to make sure that I am paying that or more for these comics to come out to my shows because I don't want them to cancel at the last minute and all of that. So I do pay them. They also get a tape. They also get great crowds. I have had comics say to me, there's no show like a Bad Mom show. It just has a really different vibe. I set up the audience of like, let's have a good time. I set up each comic for success. At least I hope I do. And we do a good job. I mean, we still pay for some marketing. We still pay for, like, lights and banners and things like that, but for the most part, this has made money enough for me to put a pause on my PR firm for the year.
Good for you. That's
I
awesome.
know.
That's great. And it is funny you mentioned the fact about comedians getting paid because that is not a thing that's generally done, especially for young up and coming comedians. Even like you mentioned sketch, I cut my teeth
Oh
at
my gosh, sketch makes nothing. I
not
feel so bad. There's these
literally zero.
7 talented people, and you're lucky if you walk away with a drink ticket.
Yeah, no, no. Like, and famously, UCB, which was created by Amy Poehler and that gang from Chicago, and the idea was that you get stage time for free. It's like you would have to pay to get on stage, but you would essentially be doing these shows for free. And they've gotten raked through the wool through the coals for the last few years. I think they're starting to now pay for these performers, but again, it's going back to like the dirty word of the economics of it, especially if you're in a major city like New York, Chicago. Leases are very expensive. You're not the rooms are not big enough where you can scale up to be like, hey, let's fit 1,000 people in there. You just can't. So the economics are a thing. And out of curiosity, talk about your rooms. Like, how big are your rooms that you're working with? What kind of crowds do you get?
The smallest room I think we do is, like, 60, and the biggest right now we have done is I think it holds 1,000 and we got 350 in it. We're growing slowly and steadily. I look at some people and I'm like, they're doing 2,000 people rooms. I probably could if I put the marketing budget behind it, but right now I just wanna grow it where I'm comfortable, and I also don't wanna make my comics burn out because this does I mean, we're going to New York in April, to several comedy clubs. We've been invited. We're going to North Carolina at the end of this month. Like, we are being invited to places, but I'm like, okay, now when you take them out of the city of Chicago, I have to pay to bring them there. I have to put them up overnight. So there's a different money situation. But I don't want them to think about that. I want them to think about this is the crowd I have. I need to do a good job. Let's have a great time. So I'm balancing both. Here's the other thing about like the UCBs and all of that. I don't know anything about the improv. And so I made this big statement before that they don't pay. I'm sure some do pay. If you find a venue that has an event space and you have a good relationship with that manager saying, we're going to put on this quality show for you and you're going to make money on the food and beverage sales and we'll help market it and all of that, then and you really put your money where your mouth is, those managers are going to be really happy. So like for example, we got in with this place called Tangled Root and they own 6 or 7 breweries around the Chicago area. When I say Chicago, I mean like 2 hours away too. And we have done such a good job with them. They're like, "We love it when you come because on a Tuesday night, we have 75 moms in this room and they're all eating and they're all drinking, they're having an amazing time, and we wouldn't have had them on a Tuesday night." So, find good partners that
Yeah.
want to that but don't just expect that partner to do all the marketing for you. You still have to do work.
Yeah.
It's
No,
it's
absolutely.
still a job.
Yes, yes. And speaking of the job, I think on the surface, when people hear your story, and they see, oh, 47-year-old mom took comedy class and now she's a comedian, think of it as a major pivot. But I personally, I see it almost as a slight pivot because you have built all these skills going into comedy that prepared you to put together Bad Moms? Because if you think about it, it's not like you were 20 something, be like, hey, I'm going to just put together a group of women to perform, but then not have the soft or hard skills about organization and structure and scheduling and all that stuff. And I always feel like a lot of people are always looking at major pivots. And I know on the surface, Orderly, it probably feels like yours is a major pivot. But I think to anyone who looks under the hood, it's like, it's kind of just a slight little pivot because you kind of were using your mom's stuff. Like, so you've got that. So it's not like you had to pivot. Not one day you woke up like, I'm going to do mom comedy. You were mom.
Right. It's not like I woke up one day and I'm like, I think I'm funny. Like I've
Yeah,
always been like the jerk at parties, you know, the
of course.
making
And I,
people laugh and getting yeah. So now I'm like, Maybe I should get paid for it."
yeah.
Um,
And also the
but
PR part of it, like you knew how that worked. Like that world is very complicated. I have that as running joke with publicists I've known my whole life. Your number one job as a publicist is not get fired. Like literally, that's all you're supposed to do is not get fired. And earlier this season, I had a photographer on by the name of Peter Hurley, and he's known as this world class photographer now, but he was a model. So people think, oh, a model pivoted from a model to photography. Like, no, as a model, he tinkered with the camera, he learned from it,
he
and in a
saw
way,
lights, he understood angles, he understood shadows. Oh yeah, absolutely. By the way, it helps that I'm sure that he's a hot photographer, just to say.
he's pretty handsome. But it's the same as you, though. The fact that you had acquired all these skills over the 20 something years of your adult life, and then you've made this work because I don't think it would have worked. Chicken and the egg thing here. Bad Moms would not exist if you didn't have this life before it.
And I think that's something people need to think about because I'm hearing a lot of friends of mine in their 50s that are getting laid off. And it's ageism across the board. And the fact is, you have more skills than you know that you have built up over the last 30, 40 years. So figure out what those skills are. And again, pivot to go into something that is actually going to make you passionate for the next how many years before you retire or maybe not even retire. And so that was my thing was I I love doing PR. I loved helping all of these companies do things, but wanted I wasn't the passion was starting to fade, and I am so was so passionate about PR that I thought if my passion is fading, then maybe I'm not doing the best job for them anymore. And I have a team that is great, and I rev up my team, my PR team, but it was just a matter of me saying, "Life is too short." I turned 50 last year, and I was like, "Life is too short." Here's the thing, Joe. This doesn't work out. I will rev up the PR firm again. I will maybe get a job at a corporation doing communications. Fine, I'll do it, but I gotta try. And I tried to do both last year, and I was exhausted. I have never gotten so sick in my life. I was just so tired. And now I'm just like, I'm gonna try it.
Wow. Are you a vision board kind of person? Like, do you have planned out like what?
Do you?
Hell no. I'm a middle-aged white guy. We don't do that. But the reason I ask is because it sounds like you have a plan behind Bad Moms. This is not something you're doing something willy-nilly. But what does like a successful Bad Moms look like in the future? Is it specials? Is it touring? Is it residencies? Like, do you have
It's
something like
all of
that?
those things,
All
but that
those.
has
Okay.
to work but it has to work out because I do understand that my demographic of who is on stage has other responsibilities. These are not moms that can leave their kids in Chicago and go do 2 months in Vegas. Like, I understand that. So, I wanna make sure I'm bringing my OGs, my originals that have been amazing and so funny, and also find new moms and make sure that it grows appropriately. Um, this could crash and burn real fast if it grows too fast. And so I'm just keeping an eye on it. But so far it's been great. And we're starting to branch out. We were in St. Louis at City Winery. We went to Nashville and Zanies. And so I'm like, we're starting to get that momentum. And I have a friend who did this group and it didn't it unfortunately because of the pandemic it faded out, but it was also a mom group and she said you have these skills that we didn't have. It's not just about the funny. It's
Mm.
about all of these other thought moments that you need. And it helps that my co-producer is not a comic. She doesn't want to be on stage. She has no desire to be on stage, but she's anal retentive, which is so great. Right? She's the queen of the clowns. So we make a really good team on making this happen.
That's awesome. That's great. All right, so I won't put anything to it, but we'll see how it goes. Out of curiosity, you mentioned earlier the fact, and I don't think you need to mention it, but the fact that comedy is a male-driven world, tends to be white. But what does the that fraction of the comedy society think about Bad Moms? I know you say you get men showing up to the shows, but like, what do male comics think? Was it difficult at first getting this going? Give me a little behind the scenes on that.
So I did this really fast. I've only been doing comedy for 3 years, which makes comics who've been doing this for 20 years totally balk at me. And I totally understand. You guys have been hitting the road and working your shtick. But if you knew my work ethic, you'd be like, yeah, it's pretty good. Okay. Um, my other thing is you can't tell me no. And I came in from a totally different angle, right? All of these comics are doing a lot of these comics are doing the same thing where they're waiting at the open mic, they're waiting for their turn, waiting for their shot, right? I didn't wait for my shot. I made it. So I started calling venues, I started calling PTAs, I started calling all this stuff. I have graphic designer that I hired to like I made this thing. And at first they were like, who does this person think she is? And now they're like, oh, she's legit. Like she knows what she's doing. She can produce. These are good shows. There are quality comics up there. So I think at first they were like, that's not how it's done. And I'm like, why? No one told me no. Let's do it. And it didn't hurt anybody. No one's choosing, oh, a bad mom show over this guy's show. Like, we can all do it. We actually work better together as comics than we do apart, but it is such a single player game sometimes that people forget.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am all about helping other people. If they're like, they call me for producer advice. They call me for blah, blah, blah advice. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it because the stronger we can make the industry, the better it off is going to be for the audience members.
Mm.
Let's do it.
It's funny that you described that because I think comedians have this sort of rebel mentality, like they're the rule breakers and everything like that. But even rule breakers have rules. Like even they know, okay, no, you're not supposed to be playing in rooms with 1,000 people if you've only been doing this 3 years. You need that's 5 years or that's 7 years. So it is funny that once you see inside that world that, and I've heard that from comedians that like it is a very good fraternity and sorority. Like people do, I mean, like every business could be assholes who don't care or don't help, but it seems generally they're helpful. It's just that I guess what you did, you were the fly in the ointment. We were like, wait a minute, you're not. That's not how I did it. It took me 10 years to get in a room where I had 500 people. So I see where the animosity comes from, just because they came from that because people were telling them when they walked in the first time, like,
Right.
hey, look, you're gonna have to put in like good 7 or 8 years before you can perform in 200 people. So it is a fascinating part of that whole stand-up comedy world.
But I have performed in front of 200 people before as my PR job. Like, here's the thing. I have been a media relations executive. I have talked to, like, it's like I was a TV news reporter for 10 years. Like, it's not as if I suddenly didn't have, I'm always comfortable on stage. What a horrible, I can't believe my husband married me. Um, and I mean, here's the thing. I think as long as this is where I think people, the animosity might have come in is every comic has been doing this for a really long time, see people come and go all the time, right? Like people burn out. It's really hard to go to an open mic at 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday when you have a job or have kids or both. So you see a lot of turnover. So they probably saw me as like a fly by night, like,
Right.
she's 50, she'll go back to the real world, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't see me do it. Instead, they saw me keep producing and keep getting it done better. Um, and so I hope that they don't see it as animosity, but they see it as an advocate for their industry because I do want everybody wants good shows. Everybody wants to have a good time. Let's do it. Let's work together.
Awesome. Well, tell me some about some of these bad moms. Age ranges, like low, top end, like what do people, and you mentioned the fact that there is sort of a like a variety. So no two bad mom shows are alike, except you. You're going to be there. But what? Tell me about some of the moms you have as part of your roster.
Oh my gosh, I love these women. So here's the little secret. Except for Mother's Day shows, I always try to throw in a non-mom. I try to throw in a woman who is not a typical mom. Because in my opinion, if everybody goes to you at work and expects you to bring the potluck stuff. And if you're a plant mom and a dog mom, you're a damn mom. If you ever say the words, "Do I have to do everything?" You're a mom. So I try to throw women up there because I think they're hysterical. Our moms, I'm not going to give you age ranges because that's rude, Joe. Uh, but their kids' age ranges are from newborn to post college married. So we have a whole gamut. So people who have teenagers, middle schoolers, all of that. In fact, one of our comics, oh my gosh, Joe, this is crazy. She gave birth on our bathroom floor in October because her doctor said, "You're not in labor." So yeah, and I called her up the next day, I go, "You got a good 5 minutes. You have such good content."
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
so, with the moms, do they ever have their kids in the audience? Do your kids ever show up? What's that? I know it's 18 and over, so I guess it takes out some of the younger kids. But like, do a lot of them bring their kids to the show?
Um, no, I mean, yeah, a couple will bring their kids to the shows, some bring their husbands. Here's the thing, this is our job. So if they're not on a Bad Mom show, they're on another show. Like, there's so many opportunities for our families to come see us do comedy. I don't go to my husband's job. I don't expect them to come to mine, but I do personally talk to my kids if I have a joke about them, or I talk to my husband, like, if I have a joke about you, like, I have this new joke that I'm working out for my husband, and I'm like, "Can I say this?" It's about the fact that my husband lets out so much methane on a daily basis. I don't understand why the Environmental Protection Agency hasn't come to my house. And he's like, "Yeah, you can say that." So,
Well,
that kind of thing.
I could see the husband's sort of like he's locked in because you have that contractual agreement of you being married and such. But like, how do the kids take it when you pitch a joke to them? Are they like, "Oh God, no,
They're
mom,
both so
really?"
different. That's such a good question. My son could care less. He's like, "Totally." I'm like, "This does not make you sound good." He's like, "I don't care. It's fine." And I'm like, "Okay." And then my daughter, kibosh on everything. "No, no, no, no. You will not talk about me on stage."
Has she ever let you do any
I
material
have
on her?
one joke. I have one joke. So she's in school in North Carolina, and I said, "I'm scared that my daughter's gonna come home from school Christian because 'cause we're Jewish." Because her first night at school, she's like, "I'm just making friendship bracelets with a bunch of friends." I'm like, "What Christian group is it?" And she texted back in all caps, "I didn't know."
Oh, that's
She's
fun.
like, "That was pretty funny."
So she okayed that one. She gave you the green light on
She
that.
gave me the green light on that one. But, like, I have all this other stuff that I would love to talk about, and it's just because when you have a daughter, it is such a different relationship than when you have a son, and it's okay, I love them both, but it's different when you have 2 alpha females in a house, right? And she's like, "No, I don't want you to talk about that," which is fine. It's
Yeah,
totally fine.
that's so cool. Where do you else do you mind for comedy where and I don't even know if this is even necessary, like, is all your comedy mom adjacent, or do you ever
No.
okay.
No, I just happen to have used my uterus as an Airbnb, but all of my content is funny. So I really just talked about my perspective as being a woman, being married, just living life. When you start thinking comedically full time, everything almost becomes a joke. Like, I went to the dentist and she was like, "Don't brush your teeth for another 30 minutes." I'm like, "Who's going home and brushing their teeth after the" like, that was amazing. Like, come on. So, like, to me, sometimes these things just occur and you just write it down. Um, yeah, that's it. Like, every comic goes up there and has their perspective. So, they're talking about their life with their families or their kids or their dating and whatever. I'm doing the same thing, I just happen to have some mom jokes in there too.
That's awesome. All right, so let's wrap up with some inspo. Someone's watching or listening to this, and they say, like, a 50-year-old lady decides to be a stand-up comic one day. What kind of conversations have you had from people that maybe either work with you or plan on working with you that you inspired them to make this jump? Because at the end of the day, all we can leave behind is a legacy. So I mean, obviously, you have your children, and maybe there will be legacy to bad moms, but like, what have you heard from people who have either been inspired to do comedy or do something else because of them hearing your story?
I've had a lot of women, and I think this happens a lot to women after they have kids where they feel like they lose a sense of identity. And so I think when people come up to me, they're not saying, "Do I wanna go into comedy?" But rather, "What can I do for myself?" because I feel like I lost myself. And I'm just like, whatever creative arts it is, like write, dance, whatever it is, you need to fill your soul because if you're going to keep taking care of everybody else and not take care of yourself, you're going to burn out. Like when you go on an airplane, they say, put your air mask on first and then help those around you. Moms do the opposite. So I think moms are coming when they ask me, they're really asking like, am I allowed to do something for myself? And yes, you are. That's one thing. A lot of my PR friends, when I told them I was starting to go in this direction, you get 2 different responses, which is, "Are you out of your damn mind? You own a business," or, "Good for you, because you should do something that you love." So, I think it's different. I think we as a human people put too much reliance on people's opinion on what we do over what joy it's gonna bring us. So, bring yourself some joy as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else and everybody's in on it with you, meaning you're not hurting or harming. Give yourself some joy. It's all good. It's gonna be fine.
Love that. Her name is Orly K.G. Orly, if folks want to find out more about you, follow the tour, find out more about Bad Moms, where should they start?
So Bad Moms with a Z, because we're cool.
Yeah.
Badmomsofcomedy.com. And you can follow us at Bad Moms of Comedy on all social media. And then Orly, ORLY KG comedy on all social media platforms. And I hope you do follow because I want to make you laugh.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time, Orly. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
And that's going to do it for today's Good Listen. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. If you enjoyed it, please tap that thumbs up button on the bottom on YouTube. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel. If you're watching on Spotify or listening on Spotify, a 5-star review would be great, and also on Apple as well. If you want to connect with me, find out more about me, send me a note, go to joepardavila.com. But until next time, adios.